Picture this. A serene flight cruising at 35,000 feet. Clouds rolling like soft cotton beneath its wings as a well-dressed black woman politely requests a simple glass of wine. She's told with an icy smile, "We've run out yet." Moments later, someone else of a different color is served the very same vintage. Tension crackles in the stale cabin air. Passengers glance over in uneasy curiosity, uncertain whether to speak out or remain silent. Little does anyone realize this ordinary passenger has extraordinary ties to the wine industry and a personal story that's about to explode on social media, shaking the airline to its very core. Ebony Baxter clutched her embossed burgundy passport between her slender fingers as she stood in line at John F. Kennedy International Airport. She'd arrived early, anticipating chaos, because she knew what flying on a holiday weekend was like: long queues, tired kids, anxious parents, and overworked staff. She tried to catch the eye of the gate agent, who busily typed on a computer keyboard, as if every keystroke fought for its life. The swirling chatter of the terminal pulsed around them, a collective hum of thousands of voices discussing flight times, seat assignments, and frantic last-minute changes. Ebony had a busy life in Napa Valley, owner of Baxter Vineyards, an emerging gem that had quietly garnered critical acclaim over the last few years. She also consulted for a few iconic estates in the area, including partnerships with restaurants that boasted Michelin stars. One in particular, the French Laundry in Yountville, featured her wines on their tasting menus. That had been a dream come true for Ebony, the kind of collaboration that said, "You've arrived." But Ebony wasn't traveling for business today. She was heading to Milan, where an international wine expo would be held the following week. The world's biggest connoisseurs and distributors would be tasting her new blends. She loved Italy, a land of vineyards and wine traditions older than the United States itself. Still, Ebony wanted to arrive feeling fresh, so she'd booked a first-class seat on a well-known airline, Skyline International. She believed the best way to manage jet lag was comfort, proper rest, a wide seat, decent in-flight wine, and a meal that wouldn't wreck her digestion. Truth be told, Ebony was also looking forward to being pampered just a little. Months of unrelenting vineyard work overseeing harvest, ensuring fermentation was perfect, traveling to business meetings, had worn her down. This flight was a chance to recharge, if even for a few hours. The gate agent looked up at Ebony and smiled with professional politeness. "May I help you, ma'am?" Ebony stepped forward, handing over her passport. She noticed the agent's eyes flicker at the name, though Ebony thought nothing of it. She got that sometimes her name had begun to hold some weight among wine enthusiasts after receiving a strong rating from Robert Parker's Wine Advocate. But Ebony was never the type to assume people recognized her automatically. "Yes, I'm checking in for flight SI-209 to Milan," Ebony said, returning the agent's smile. "Of course," the agent replied quickly, scanning Ebony's passport and tapping more on the keyboard. "You're in seat 2A first class. Enjoy your flight, and thanks for choosing Skyline International." The agent handed Ebony her boarding pass. "Please board when you hear your group called." Ebony thanked her. With her single carry-on in tow, she walked to a nearby cafe for a latte. While she waited, she scrolled through emails on her phone. A message popped up from the Expo coordinator in Milan, welcoming her to the event and reminding her that she'd be presenting in prime time. Ebony grinned. Prime time. That meant the organizers considered her vineyard's presence significant. She typed a quick reply of thanks, then sipped her coffee while a swirl of excitement churned in her stomach. When first-class boarding was called, Ebony strolled up to the gate. The flight attendants welcomed her, greeted her kindly, and offered to stow her bag. She noticed none of them called her by name, but that didn't matter. She found her seat, tucked her carry-on in the overhead bin, and settled in for what she hoped would be a restful flight. How wrong she was. As Ebony sank into the plush seat, she was relieved by its comfort. She always loved the moment before takeoff, the mechanical whir of the plane's systems, the gentle reminders from the crew, the hush that fell once all passengers were aboard. Outside the window, the runway stretched like a promise to the horizon. Inside, Ebony mentally plotted her tasks for the upcoming expo. She'd meet with importers, discuss distribution deals, and host a tasting of her new private reserve. This was important, potentially game-changing for Baxter Vineyards. A flight attendant with a neat, tight bun and a no-nonsense expression approached. Ebony noticed the woman's name tag, H. Parker. Parker had a swift gait and a quick smile that didn't quite reach her eyes. "Welcome aboard, Ms. Baxter," she said, showing Ebony's name on a passenger list. "May I get you something to drink before we take off?" "I'd love a glass of water," Ebony replied politely. "And maybe after takeoff, I'll try whatever red wine you have available." She offered a pleasant smile, expecting a routine response. Parker scribbled on her small notepad, gave Ebony a curt nod, and moved on. It was a typical interaction, nothing amiss. Ebony sipped her water a few minutes later, satisfied that maybe she'd have a quiet flight. But something about Parker's demeanor, like she was forcing courtesy, made Ebony feel that the cordial facade was as thin as the plane's overhead cabin compartments. Still, Ebony brushed it off, focusing instead on pre-flight announcements and the gentle hum of the engines. It didn't take long for Ebony to become aware that Parker was more exacting than other flight attendants she'd encountered. The crew had begun meal service once the plane reached cruising altitude. Ebony observed Parker from her seat, the woman's forced smiles for some passengers, her genuine laughter for others. She seemed to gravitate toward the business traveler in seat 3C, a white man in his mid-40s who wore an expensive watch and boasted about his latest corporate mergers. With him, Parker's smile was unguarded, her tone playful. Yet when she moved to Ebony's row, her body stiffened, voice clipped. Ebony requested the usual. "May I have a glass of your red? Maybe a Merlot or Cabernet, whatever's on the menu." Parker's lips pursed. "We'll see what we have left," she said, glancing away. "We might have run low. Let me check." She promptly walked away. Ebony felt a twinge of surprise. Run low on first-class wine service, only an hour into the flight. That was unusual. Ebony glanced around. She noticed other passengers sipping red-white sparkling. Maybe it's the brand of red that's short, Ebony told herself. She tried to remain calm, no need to jump to conclusions. But something nagged at her. She decided to watch Parker's interactions with others. Over the next 20 minutes, Ebony spotted Parker offering wine to multiple passengers. Ebony could even see the slender necks of the bottles being poured at the galley cart. The label was a brand Ebony recognized an Italian winery, ironically enough, and Ebony had actually visited that vineyard during a previous trip to Tuscany. A known standard in first class. Clearly they were not out. Ebony caught Parker's eye the next time she came near. "Excuse me, Miss Parker," Ebony said gently. "I noticed you were serving red wine to others. May I have a glass as well, please?" Parker tightened her mouth. "I'm sorry, ma'am. We're actually out of that particular bottle. I'm afraid the only wine left is white. Would you like that instead? Ebony knew from her vantage point that was false. The bottle was still on the cart. She could see at least 2 more bottles below it. Her heartbeat thudded as she tried to keep her voice measured. I'm a bit confused. I can see you have more red on the cart. The flight attendant's eyebrows rose sharply. We do our best to accommodate all passengers, but supply is limited, especially on a long flight. We can't always guarantee the same choice for everyone. Her tone was laced with condescension. Ebony inhaled slowly, forcing herself to remain calm. She was aware that a few passengers nearby had turned to watch. She realized this moment held a significance bigger than wine. It felt personal, like a microaggression, a comment or action that on the surface seemed minor but pointed to deeper prejudice. But Ebony weighed her options: cause a scene or approach the situation diplomatically. She decided to try reason first. Ms. Parker, I completely understand that supplies can be limited. I also know we're only about an hour into the flight, and I've clearly seen you pour red for at least 3 other passengers. If there's another reason I can't have a glass, please let me know. You're insinuating something, ma'am. Parker's eyes flared. I'm simply following procedure. I'm sure we can find you a beverage more suitable. Perhaps we have some sparkling water left. An uncomfortable hush fell over the front cabin. Ebony noticed a couple on her left, an older woman with a gentle face, and her husband both watching with dismay. The husband leaned over to Ebony. We just got served the red, he said quietly. There's plenty. Ebony nodded in acknowledgement. She appreciated that a stranger felt compelled to speak on her behalf. She took another breath, turning back to Parker. I would like the same courtesy extended to me as other passengers, please. Parker's posture went rigid. She mumbled something about verifying the wine supply, then walked away briskly, leaving Ebony unsettled. Ebony realized that her day, her entire trip, had just taken a hostile turn. The words, I'm simply following procedure, echoed in her mind. Half an hour passed. Ebony tried to distract herself with a movie, but the tension lay thick in the cabin. She kept replaying the scene, wondering if she should press the call button or wait. Eventually, another flight attendant, a younger man named Matteo, according to his name tag, stopped by Ebony's seat with an apologetic expression. Baxter, he began softly. I'm very sorry for the inconvenience. I have a glass of red for you if you'd like. He held out a glass. Ebony felt her shoulders sag in relief, though she also wondered if Parker had refused to bring it herself. Ebony took the glass, whispered her thanks, and inhaled the wine's aroma out of habit. It was indeed the same Tuscan red she'd seen in the cart. She looked at Matteo, wanting to say more, but he held her gaze for a moment. In that unspoken second, Ebony recognized that he knew what was going on, that he disapproved but perhaps couldn't directly contradict a senior flight attendant. Ebony took a sip notes of blackberry oak and a hint of spice and tried to focus on anything else. As Ebony leaned back, the scene triggered memories of other times she'd faced prejudice. She flashed back to her earliest days in the wine industry, fresh out of UC Davis's viticulture and enology program. She had been one of the few black women in her cohort consistently questioned or overlooked. People often assumed she was just the hired help at tasting events rather than the winemaker. She'd respond politely, I'm the vintner, or I'm the owner, each time seeing the shock that flickered across their faces. Then there was the time Ebony had tried to pitch Baxter Vineyards to an upscale restaurant in Manhattan. The beverage director had greeted her with a dismissive glance. "We already have enough California wines," he'd said. Ebony later discovered the restaurant had just added 2 new Napa labels that very week, both from male owners. Over time, Ebony learned to hold her head high to prove herself through the unassailable quality of her wines. Critics, patrons, and other vineyards began to notice. Slowly, Ebony and her brand gained traction. Back in the present, Ebony sighed, swirling the wine in her glass. She told herself to remain steadfast, that no matter how far she'd come, microaggressions and racism could still appear anywhere, even in a first-class cabin at 35,000 feet. Handle it with grace, she told herself. Handle it with dignity. She resolved to keep calm, but also not to let such treatment slide. A few hours into the flight, Ebony felt the plane shudder slightly with turbulence. The seatbelt sign dinged on. She had just finished the meal chicken with roasted vegetables that tasted better than expected. She paused her movie to stretch. That was when Parker reappeared, collecting trays from the business traveler behind Ebony. Ebony overheard something that made her ears prick. "I can't believe the nerve of some people," Parker muttered to the man who gave a half-laugh in response. "Entitled expecting special treatment. Some folks see something they want and just demand it, no respect for rules." Ebony felt the tension coil in her gut. She suspected Parker was referencing her, especially with that barbed emphasis on some people. Ebony glanced over her shoulder just in time to see Parker flash Ebony a brief look of disdain, as if daring Ebony to speak. Ebony decided not to address it publicly yet. She would speak to a supervisor or someone else on the flight, because direct confrontation with Parker could escalate matters. But Parker was making it difficult to maintain composure. Ebony could see that other passengers were noticing, some with sympathetic glances, others with blank faces, seemingly wanting no involvement. When the seatbelt sign switched off, Ebony quietly approached one of the flight attendants near the galley, a middle-aged woman named Teresa. Teresa had a kind face and had previously smiled at Ebony in passing. Ebony introduced herself softly. "I'm sorry to bother you," Ebony began, "but I'm feeling uncomfortable with how Ms. Parker has been treating me. Earlier she told me there was no red wine available, yet I saw it being served to everyone else. And I overheard some remarks that I believe were about me. I'd like to know if there's a lead attendant or a purser I can speak to." Teresa frowned, her eyes darting around as if checking if Parker was nearby. "I'm sorry you're experiencing that, Ms. Baxter. Let me see what I can do. Our purser's name is Mr. Huang. He's in charge of the cabin. I'll let him know you'd like a word." Ebony thanked her. Within a few minutes, Teresa guided Ebony to the front galley, where she introduced Mr. Huang. He was a tall, slender man, with a gentle handshake and an earnest smile. The engine's hum was louder in the galley, making them lean close to hear each other. "Ms. Baxter, I understand you've had an issue regarding our service," Mr. Huang began. "Yes," Ebony explained quietly. "I'm trying to remain polite, but I feel that Ms. Parker, a flight attendant, has singled me out. First, I was denied wine. I had to ask multiple times while others were served freely. Then she implied I was asking for special treatment. She's also made comments in earshot that seem unprofessional." Mr. Huang furrowed his brow. "I'm truly sorry to hear that. We strive to offer the best experience for all passengers. I'll look into it. In the meantime, is there anything I can get you to make your flight more comfortable?" Ebony paused. "No, thank you. I'm not looking for special privileges. I just want fair treatment like any other first-class passenger. I appreciate your assistance." Mr. Huang nodded. I understand completely. Let me talk to Ms. Parker, and if you'd like, you can file a formal complaint after landing. Meanwhile, if there's anything urgent, just press the call button or ask Teresa. Ebony agreed, returning to her seat. She half expected Parker to appear with an insincere apology, but the next hour passed without sight of her. Matteo or Teresa handled Ebony's requests, which were minimal: a refill of water, a blanket. Ebony could practically feel the tension from across the cabin, though she tried to refocus on an upcoming presentation for the expo. Eventually, Ebony decided to gather her thoughts. She pulled out her laptop, opened a blank document, and typed bullet points of how she felt frustrated, demeaned, singled out. She also listed possible solutions: report the incident, share her story on social media, or simply move on. Ebony's mind whirled, remembering the countless times she'd kept silent. She was no longer that young, uncertain woman trying to find her footing in the wine world. She had a platform now. She had the means to speak up not only for herself, but for others who faced similar prejudice. That was when Ebony heard it again. Parker's dismissive laugh, a conversation with the man in 3C about demanding people. Ebony clenched her jaw, closed her laptop, and decided, I have to say something. She rose, took a breath, and approached Parker, who was tidying the galley. Ebony's heart pounded. Miss Parker, may I speak with you for a moment? Parker turned. Is there a problem? Her tone was tight. I'd like to clarify something. Ebony's voice was calm but firm. When you denied me a glass of wine earlier, yet served it to others, and then implied that I was demanding special treatment, were you aware that I'm actually in the wine business? Parker's gaze flickered. I wouldn't know that. Why would that matter? Ebony's lips curved into a measured smile. It matters because denying a passenger a beverage available to everyone else can be seen as discriminatory, and it's particularly ironic since wine is my career. I'm Ebony Baxter of Baxter Vineyards in Napa. I recognize the label you were pouring. I've consulted for that brand's growth strategy, so you can imagine my surprise when you insisted it was out of stock. I was just curious if you or the airline had ever heard of my vineyard or me. Parker's eyes widened for a moment before she forced a brittle laugh. Ma'am, I serve many passengers a day. I can't possibly know all your backgrounds. Are you trying to intimidate me? Ebony shook her head. Not at all. But I will not tolerate being singled out. I believe this was racially motivated. Let's not dance around it. If you say otherwise, that's fine, but the evidence strongly suggests discrimination. By now, the volume of Ebony's voice, while still controlled, was enough to draw the attention of passengers in the first-class cabin. Some craned their necks. A hush descended, broken only by the soft hum of the engines. Parker's voice caught in her throat. She shot Ebony a glare. I treat all passengers equally, she said flatly. Now, if you'll excuse me, I have work to do. Ebony nodded, stepping aside. Of course, she replied calmly. I've already spoken to Mr. Huang. I'll be filing a complaint with him, and I'll make sure the airline is fully aware of your comments. Ebony returned to her seat, heart pounding so hard she was certain others could see it thumping against her blouse. Teresa approached Ebony a moment later, quietly apologizing for the conflict. She offered Ebony a coffee, which Ebony accepted. I understand how you feel, Teresa whispered. Truly, I'm sorry. I hope Mr. Huang can resolve this. Ebony appreciated the kind gesture. As she sipped the coffee, she heard murmurs around her. Several passengers whispered about the incident. A teenage girl with her mother in seat 2B leaned over. "That's so unfair," she said softly to Ebony. "I saw her pouring wine for everyone else." Ebony thanked the girl for her concern. Though Ebony didn't want a full-blown confrontation in the air, she found solace in the fact that witnesses acknowledged the injustice. Prejudice wasn't always so visible, but here it was out in the open for all to see. Despite Ebony's attempts to maintain composure, her thoughts churned. She felt powerless at 35,000 feet, but not entirely. She had her phone, though there was no Wi-Fi at the moment. She could at least document the situation for future reference. Ebony typed out a note. "Denied wine by flight attendant in first class. Clear double standard. Suspected racism. Considering next steps." Bonnet. Ebony Baxter Flight, SI-209. Skyline International. She saved it. Once they landed in Milan, she could decide whether to share her story publicly. But a twist came sooner than she expected. Another passenger had apparently snapped a photo of Ebony and Parker, speaking tensely in the aisle. Ebony didn't notice it at the time, but the passenger ended up posting a tweet with an account that had a moderate following. The tweet read, "Racist drama on my flight. Black woman in first class denied wine while others got served. Flight attendant singled her out, total meltdown in the aisle. Skyline, Airlines, racial bias." The tweet began to spread, gathering retweets even before landing. Ebony would find out later that someone recognized her from a magazine feature about rising black female vintners, and they tagged Ebony's Vineyard in a subsequent post. The stage for social media scrutiny was set. While Ebony tried to rest her thoughts, spun in circles, she recalled how far she'd come. Originally, she'd grown up in a modest neighborhood in Oakland. Her parents worked tirelessly, her father as a mail carrier, her mother as a teacher. They had saved every penny to send Ebony to the best schools they could afford. Ebony, in turn, had hustled through scholarships, part-time jobs, and eventually found her passion for wine in college. She poured her heart and soul into Baxter Vineyards, building it from a tiny leased plot of land to a successful enterprise known for bold Cabernets and delicate Pinot Noir. Now, on a flight to an event that could further cement her place in the wine world, she faced a humiliating confrontation for wanting a simple glass of red. She almost laughed at the irony. If Parker had recognized Ebony from her press coverage, would she have acted differently? Ebony suspected yes. But Ebony didn't want special treatment because of her status. She just wanted equality. That's all. She closed her eyes and tried to push the tension away, focusing on her upcoming speech in Milan about diversity in winemaking. The expo organizers had specifically asked Ebony to talk about the challenges of being a minority in the wine industry. How fitting Ebony thought that she was living through another example right now. Not long after Ebony drifted into a light sleep, she was awakened by a gentle tap on her shoulder. Mr. Huang stood there, his expression grave. "Ms. Baxter." "I've spoken to Ms. Parker," he began in a low voice. "I do apologize for any discomfort you've experienced. I want to assure you that Skyline International does not tolerate discrimination of any kind." Ebony blinked the sleep from her eyes. She noticed Parker lingering near the galley, looking irritated. Ebony could guess the conversation that had taken place. "Thank you, Mr. Huang. I appreciate your efforts," she replied. He offered a measured nod. "I can't speak to Ms. Parker's personal feelings, but I've reiterated to her the airline service standards. If you feel you've been mistreated, I encourage you to file a written complaint once we land. Is there anything else I can do for you now to make your journey more comfortable?" Ebony glanced at Parker. The woman quickly avoided eye contact, busying herself with the cart. Ebony exhaled. "I think I'm okay for now," she said softly. "Thank you again." "Of course," Mr. Huang replied. "We have about 5 more hours before we arrive in Milan. If you need anything, feel free to call on me directly." Just when Ebony thought the situation might die down, a sudden commotion erupted in seat 3C, the business traveler Parker had been so friendly with. He pressed the call button repeatedly, summoning Parker. "I'm sorry, Ms. Parker," he said, trying to contain his anger, "but the screen on my console just went out. I can't finish my movie. This is unacceptable. I paid for first class, and I can't even watch a film." Parker tried to calm him, fiddling with the screen. It remained blank. "Sir, I'll see if we can get a reset from the system in the cabin controls," she said, her voice trembling slightly under the man's complaints. The man became more agitated. "This is ridiculous. I can't believe I'm stuck here with no entertainment." Ebony watched from across the aisle, noticing the shift in Parker's demeanor. She was flustered, apologetic, no longer aloof, and in control. Calmer, Ebony thought, is a curious thing. Of all the seats in the cabin, it had to be seat 3C that malfunctioned a passenger Parker clearly wanted to keep happy. The small piece of Ebony that believed in cosmic justice couldn't help but see a hint of retribution in the sudden breakdown of the man's entertainment system. Soon after, Mr. Huang was called again to address the broken screen. The airline staff attempted to reset the entertainment system, but it refused to reboot. The man in 3C demanded some form of compensation, or a seat change. Anything, he insisted. But first class was fully booked. There was no spare seat. The man threatened to write scathing reviews online, mentioning Parker by name for not fixing the problem quickly. In an odd turn of events, Ebony found herself feeling sympathy for Parker. Despite Parker's prejudiced behavior, Ebony knew what it was like to face a complaining customer. She watched Parker struggle, and Teresa stepped in to defuse the conflict. Ebony realized that for Parker, this flight was quickly unraveling into a nightmare. The man's volume rose, the tension soared. Ebony overheard him yelling, "I'll never fly. Skyline again. I'll drag you on social media if this isn't handled immediately." During the commotion, Ebony needed a bottle of water. Parker, red-faced, tried to compose herself, turned and nearly bumped into Ebony in the aisle. Their eyes locked in an awkward moment. Ebony could see the stress lines on Parker's face, the desperation to maintain order. For a split second, Ebony's empathy flared. Parker was clearly having a meltdown. Ebony calmly said, "It's okay, I'll get my own water." She reached for a bottle from the cart. Parker swallowed. A flicker of something, maybe gratitude, passed over her features. Thank you," she muttered. Then she pivoted back to seat 3C, bracing for another round of complaints. Ebony settled back in her seat, sipping water, reflecting on how complicated human behavior could be. Even though Parker had treated her horribly, Ebony was not one to relish another person's suffering. Still, she couldn't deny the sense of cosmic irony. Parker had singled Ebony out for poor treatment, only to face a bigger headache with another passenger. Ebony wondered if Parker would learn anything from this experience. Unknown to everyone in the cabin, the tweet about Ebony's ordeal was going semi-viral. A user recognized Ebony's name in the original post and tweeted, "If that's Ebony Baxter from Baxter Vineyards, she's a rising star in wine. She shouldn't be denied anything, especially not in first class. Skyline Airlines #racism." The story picked up traction retweets and comments condemning the airline. People were tagging official Skyline International accounts, demanding accountability. The story seemed to resonate, especially given Ebony's status as a successful black woman in a traditionally white-dominated industry. A major wine blogger with a large following chimed in. If Ebony Baxter was mistreated, that's messed up. She's known for championing diversity in wine. Skyline had better address this or face a PR nightmare. Despite Ebony's lack of internet access, the wheels of public opinion were already spinning. By the time the flight was halfway across the Atlantic, the airline's public relations department was aware of the controversy and scrambling for information. With about 2 hours left in the flight, Ebony felt restless. She couldn't sleep, so she stood near the galley, stretching her legs. Mr. Huang approached with a contrite smile. "Ms. Baxter, I just received a message from our ground team. It seems a passenger on this flight posted about the incident on social media, and it's gaining attention." Ebony's eyebrows shot up. "That was fast. I wasn't aware." He nodded. "Yes, Skyline's PR department is concerned. They've instructed me to assure you that we take this very seriously and will investigate fully. Ms. Parker has been asked to apologize to you formally. You'll also be contacted by our customer relations team after we land." Ebony sighed, bracing for the forced apology she never asked for. Sure enough, moments later, Parker emerged, face taut. She looked Ebony in the eyes. "Ms. Baxter," she began, "I apologize if my service came across as unfair or discriminatory. I didn't intend to cause any distress." Her tone lacked warmth, but Ebony guessed that was the best Parker could muster. Ebony nodded. "Thank you for your apology. I hope in the future situations like this can be avoided. It's not a matter of special treatment, but equal treatment." Parker swallowed her eyes momentarily, flicking aside. Then she made a stiff exit. The flight descended into Milan Malpensa Airport. The seatbelt lights clicked on. Ebony felt a mix of relief and apprehension. She wanted to get off the plane and focus on the wine expo, but she also dreaded the confrontation that would likely occur with Skyline representatives. Sure enough, as soon as the aircraft taxied to the gate, Mr. Huang politely requested Ebony remain on board for a moment after other passengers disembarked. Ebony agreed, letting the crowd shuffle off. She collected her carry-on, rechecking her phone. As soon as the cell signal returned, it buzzed with notifications. Emails, voicemails, text messages, social media tags. Her phone was ablaze. She opened Twitter to see her name trending locally. Hundreds of supportive comments, some outraged. Ebony's eyes widened. She realized that whether she liked it or not, this incident had gone public. Soon, a ground staff manager boarded, introduced himself as Mark Ross from Skyline International's Milan team. He led Ebony to the jet bridge, where they could speak privately. "So, Baxter," he said, voice trembling with professional courtesy. "I'm so sorry about this situation. We've been informed there was an incident on board involving alleged discriminatory behavior. Skyline's senior management is prepared to offer you a formal apology and compensation for any distress. We'd be honored if you'd allow us to escort you to our premium arrivals lounge, where we can discuss this further." Ebony regarded Mark with weary eyes. She was tired physically and emotionally, but she recognized the importance of seeing this through. "Thank you, Mark. I'm willing to listen. But let me be clear. I don't want hush money. I want accountability. I want to ensure this doesn't happen to another passenger." Mark nodded fervently. Understood, ma'am. We're committed to addressing your concerns. Mark guided Ebony through passport control and into Skyline's private arrivals lounge, a sleek modern space with plush chairs, free Wi-Fi, and a small buffet. A few staff members stood by, clearly on edge, unsure how to navigate a potential PR crisis. Ebony took a seat in a corner away from prying eyes. Mark offered her water and pastries, which she politely declined. She needed to rest, but more importantly, she needed resolution. Ms. Baxter. Mark began settling into a chair across from her. Our team is investigating what happened. We'd like to offer you a complimentary upgrade voucher for your next flight, plus a substantial flight credit. Of course, Ms. Parker's behavior will be reviewed by our HR department, and disciplinary measures will be taken if we find misconduct. Ebony listened, nodding, but her mind was already spinning. She decided to speak plainly. I appreciate that, but this is bigger than just me. Skyline needs to examine how it trains and monitors crew for implicit or explicit bias. A voucher won't fix the underlying issue. I'd be happy to speak with your senior managers or even your diversity team about ways to improve the passenger experience, especially for people of color. But I'm not going to be silenced. Mark's expression wavered between relief and nervousness. We absolutely agree that more can be done. I'll relay your input to corporate. In the meantime, could we publicly issue a statement, apologizing to you, acknowledging that the incident was unacceptable and reaffirming our commitment to diversity and equality? Ebony hesitated. As long as it's sincere and not just a PR stunt, and I'd like to have some say in the wording if possible. Mark visibly gulped, but nodded. They exchanged business cards, and Ebony promised to email him further details after she'd rested. Sensing Ebony's exhaustion, Mark excused himself so she could enjoy some privacy. Ebony slumped in the lounge chair, rubbing her temples, trying to process the whirlwind. She still had to get to her hotel, prepare for the expo, and figure out how to handle the media storm that was brewing. Ebony finally made it to her hotel near downtown Milan. After a quick shower, she crashed for a couple of hours, but her phone never stopped buzzing. Journalists wanted comments. Friends and colleagues sent messages of support. The expo coordinators offered assistance if Ebony needed anything. Despite the exhaustion, Ebony felt an odd sense of empowerment. Yes, she'd been discriminated against, but now she had a platform to address it directly. She was determined to channel this experience into something constructive. The next day, Ebony arrived at the Fiera Milano exhibition center, bustling with wine producers and connoisseurs from around the globe. Booths stretched across multiple halls, each showcasing their best vintages. Baxter Vineyards had a modest but well-decorated stand, featuring a banner with Ebony's photo pouring wine in the rolling hills of Napa. The expo had assigned her a prime spot near the entrance to the main tasting hall, a testament to her growing influence. As Ebony set up, she couldn't help noticing the double takes from some visitors who recognized her. A few approached with kind words about the airline incident, which they'd read online. One woman from a high-end wine shop in London said, "I'm so sorry about the discrimination you faced. People like that flight attendant give the industry a bad name. We support you." Ebony thanked her, focusing on her real purpose here, presenting her wines. She had arranged a tasting flight, her signature Cabernet Sauvignon, a bright Pinot Noir, a crisp Chardonnay, and her newest release, a velvety Merlot, she dubbed Fortitude in honor of resilience through adversity. Midway through the expo's first day, Ebony was approached by Paolo, one of the event organizers. "Ebony, there's quite a bit of media interest in you right now," he said, looking both excited and concerned. They're not just interested in your wines, but also the airplane incident. They're asking if you'll hold a short press conference. What do you think Ebony's first instinct was to recoil? She didn't want her identity to be overshadowed by a racist flight attendant. But Ebony realized she had an opportunity to push for something meaningful. "I'll do it," she said. "But I want to talk about Baxter Vineyards and the importance of diversity in wine, as well as mention the airline incident as an example of what many people face." Paolo nodded. "We can set up a small area near the main stage. Let's schedule it for tomorrow morning if that works for you." "Perfect," Ebony answered, though she felt a surge of nerves. She'd done wine presentations, interviews about her business, but never had she faced a media scrum about a racist encounter. Still, Ebony told herself this was a chance to speak truth. That evening, Ebony opened her email and saw a surprising message from Skyline International's corporate office. They'd drafted a public statement. It read, in part, "We at Skyline International deeply regret the incident on flight SI-209, where passenger Ebony Baxter was denied equal service. We are actively investigating the matter and have taken steps to address the issue with the flight attendant. Skyline International is committed to ensuring that all passengers, regardless of race, receive fair and respectful treatment." Ebony read it carefully, noticing that while it was a start, the language was somewhat vague and didn't directly acknowledge racism. She replied requesting they explicitly mention the words racial discrimination and commit to mandatory training for staff. Within an hour, a revised statement came back. It was still corporate in tone, but more direct, apologizing specifically for the racially discriminatory experience Ms. Baxter endured. Ebony sighed, thinking it was an improvement. She had no illusions it would end bigotry overnight, but it was a step. She gave them her final sign-off. Shortly after, Ebony scrolled through social media to see the reaction. Some praised Skyline for owning up to the issue, others believed it was too little too late. Ebony knew how these things went. There'd be a short media cycle, and unless real systemic changes happened, the next scandal would overshadow this one. Still, Ebony felt a weight lift. She had turned an ugly situation into impetus for corporate responsibility, even if limited. The next morning, Ebony stood at a small podium in front of a semicircle of reporters. Cameras clicked, microphones poised. Paolo introduced her. Ebony Baxter, owner of Baxter Vineyards, a leading figure in the new wave of Napa wineries, will share her story and speak about her vision for diversity in the wine industry. Ebony inhaled, steadying her nerves. "Thank you for coming," she began. "I'm here at the expo to celebrate wine, which I love wholeheartedly. I'm also here as a black female vintner in a field that has not always been welcoming. And recently on my flight to Milan, I faced racial discrimination from a flight attendant who denied me wine, something I saw offered to others freely. It was hurtful, it was humiliating, and it was not new. This sort of bias happens every day in big and small ways to people of color around the world. But I stand before you as a testament to resilience. Baxter Vineyards was built on my dream of sharing my passion for wine with all people. We're not done fighting racism, whether it's in an airplane cabin, a vineyard, or a boardroom. Skyline International has issued a statement apologizing. I hope they follow through with meaningful training. I also hope by speaking about this openly, more individuals, companies, and industries reflect on how they treat people of color. It's not just about one glass of wine. It's about the larger glass ceiling we face. Ultimately, I want my wines to bring people together across races, classes, backgrounds, and unite us in appreciation for life's finer moments. That's why I'll continue to speak out and hold people accountable. Thank you for listening, and I'm happy to answer questions, preferably about wine and diversity. But I'll also address the airline incident if needed." A flurry of questions followed. Ebony answered each calmly, weaving in stories of her journey in the wine world. She refused to let the airline fiasco define her, instead using it as a cautionary tale and call to action for equality. By the time the conference wrapped, Ebony felt a sense of catharsis. She had used her voice, and she wasn't done yet. Later that afternoon, Ebony returned to her booth, greeting new visitors. She was in the middle of discussing tasting notes with an Italian restaurateur when a familiar face approached Matteo, the young flight attendant who had brought Ebony the glass of red wine mid-flight. He wore casual clothes now, his airline uniform left behind, and he looked a bit nervous. "Ms. Baxter," he said, almost shyly, "I'm sorry to bother you. I just wanted to say I'm sorry for what you went through on the flight. I tried to intervene, but Ms. Parker was senior to me, and I just didn't want to lose my job." Ebony's heart warmed at the sight of him. "Matteo, of course. You were kind to me. I appreciate your actions more than you know. I read some of the coverage online," he continued. "I'm glad you spoke up. I hope the airline makes changes." He looked around the booth, taking in the banners and wine bottles. "Baxter Vineyards, huh? I didn't realize you were such a big deal." Ebony smiled, her gaze flicking to the display of her wines. "I like to think of it as a small but growing deal. If you're ever in Napa, come visit the Vineyard. I'd love to show you around." Matteo nodded enthusiastically. "I'd really like that." He shook her hand, then purchased a bottle of her signature Cabernet, insisting she sign the label. Ebony obliged, signing with a flourish. To Matteo, thanks for doing the right thing. News about Ms. Parker came to Ebony later that day via social media chatter. Apparently, Skyline had put Parker on administrative leave pending a full investigation. Some employees at Skyline posted anonymously that Parker had a history of complaints from minority passengers, though they were often disregarded due to lack of proof. This time, Ebony's platform, plus the social media fervor, made it impossible for the airline to ignore. Ebony felt neither joy nor pity for Parker. She recognized that consequences had to exist if real change was to happen. Still, Ebony's focus remained on the bigger picture. She made a mental note to check in with Skyline's diversity team if they reached out, hoping to offer perspective on how staff training could improve. Ebony wanted to ensure that future travelers, especially those who looked like her, wouldn't face such blatant discrimination again. Over the next few days, Ebony's wines were a hit at the expo. Attendees flocked to her booth, tasting her selections and congratulating her for standing up to racism. The public support boosted not only Ebony's confidence, but also her brand's recognition. Several international distributors placed sizable orders for Baxter Vineyards, and Ebony even secured a few high-profile restaurant deals in Europe. The synergy between the spotlight on her ordeal and the undeniable quality of her wines worked in her favor. On the final day, Ebony was invited to the expo's closing gala, a black tie event at a historic venue in central Milan. As she strolled in, wearing a sleek navy gown, she felt a sense of triumph that overshadowed the unpleasant memory of the flight. She had emerged stronger, her vineyard's reputation shining brighter than ever. Back in her hotel room after the gala, Ebony sank into an armchair, gazing at the city lights of Milan. She replayed the events in her mind, the humiliating moment of being denied wine, Parker's hostility, the karmic meltdown with Seat 3C, and the final corporate apology. It all felt surreal. Yet Ebony also felt proud. She had confronted racism head-on, leveraged her platform, and insisted on accountability. She hadn't backed down or let the fear of public scrutiny silence her. In her quiet reflection, Ebony decided to share a personal note on social media. She typed on her phone, "Thank you to everyone who supported me after the incident on Skyline Flight SI-209. Racial bias exists, but so does our resolve to stand against it. I'm grateful for the outpouring of kindness from friends, strangers, and especially those in the wine community who believe that a glass of wine is meant to unite, not divide. Love to you all from Milan." #Baxter Vineyards. No to racism. Wine unites. She hit post, feeling lighter. After concluding her business in Milan, Ebony embarked on her return journey to Napa. This time, Skyline International had upgraded her to first class, again no questions asked, and assigned a senior purser to personally oversee her comfort. Ebony accepted the gesture, but remained watchful, determined not to let her guard down. The flight was uneventful, free of conflict, and Ebony actually enjoyed a robust syrah from Skyline's selection served promptly and without fuss. As she landed in San Francisco, Ebony breathed in the familiar California air. A wave of relief and belonging washed over her. She was home. She had new deals in her pocket, a renewed sense of purpose, and an unwavering resolve to continue advocating for equality in her industry and beyond. In the following weeks, Skyline International announced enhanced sensitivity and anti-bias training for all cabin crews. They collaborated with several diversity consultants and even released a video featuring interviews with staff members from different backgrounds, emphasizing inclusivity. Though some critics labeled it corporate damage control, Ebony received private messages from a few Skyline employees thanking her for sparking real conversations in the company. Ebony continued to receive messages from around the world. Black travelers who recounted similar experiences, minority vintners praising her for speaking out, and everyday people who related to the subtle humiliations of microaggressions. Ebony realized that her story resonated beyond wine. It spoke to the universal desire for respect and dignity. At Baxter Vineyards, Ebony used her newfound spotlight to launch an annual scholarship program for students of color pursuing wine studies at UC Davis. She named it the Open Vines Scholarship, a nod to the open-mindedness and inclusivity she aimed to cultivate in the wine community. Donations poured in after Ebony's story went viral, and she was able to fund multiple students each year. If Ebony had any say in the future, fewer talented black and brown students would be discouraged from entering the field due to lack of resources or microaggressions. And what of Ms. Parker officially? Ebony only knew that an internal investigation led to Parker's suspension. Rumors floated that Parker resigned rather than face mandatory training. Regardless of the outcome, Ebony hoped Parker and anyone else who heard the story would reflect on how a single act of discrimination could affect a person's life and the ripple effects it could unleash. In the end, Ebony Baxter's triumph wasn't just a personal victory. It was a collective step forward. She had uncovered yet another pocket of prejudice and challenged it publicly. She had turned an act of bias into an impetus for reform, and she had done it with the same grace and determination she brought to her wine-making. Because just like fine wine, change requires careful cultivation and time, but with diligence and heart, it can flourish into something truly beautiful. Thank you for tuning in to hear the story of how one traveler, Ebony Baxter, turned a humiliating act of racism into a catalyst for change both for herself and an international airline. Her experience reminds us that a moment of discrimination can unlock a powerful transformation when we stand firm against injustice. If this story resonated with you, then remember every glass of wine we raise is a chance to connect across differences, celebrate our shared humanity, and deepen our commitment to fairness. Now, if you enjoyed this video and want to support more stories that spotlight real battles for equality and empowerment, please do me a favor. Hit the like button, subscribe to my channel, and share this video with your friends. Your support helps these important messages reach more people and fosters real progress in our communities. Until next time, cheers to unity and justice.